Hi, everybody. I'm glad you're able to join us. Today we have a great lineup, starting with our very own Summit County Prosecutor, Sherry Bevan Walsh. And because we are always tight on time with our classes, we're going to get started right away. So, Prosecutor Walsh, take it away.
All right, thank you, Tanya. Welcome, everyone. I know this is I think your third class, so I'm sorry I wasn't able to be with you on the first class to introduce myself, but we're really happy that all of you are participating. I'm going to start off, at least from my understanding, at your first meeting, everybody shared an interesting fact about themselves, which that's not the easiest thing to do, by the way, when you start thinking, all right, what's my interesting fact? So I have
is maddening, and it adds to the damage. And
it's okay.
Some people will go through a long duration.
Okay. I thought that was you, James, for a minute. Okay. All right. So, interesting fact. I love to travel, despite the fact that 25 years ago, I was on a plane that had some type of explosion during takeoff, and we had to come to a screeching halt, and I had to slide down the chute through smoke and flames and run down the runway because they thought the entire plane was going to blow up. But despite that, I actually continue to fly. I will tell you that every time I fly during takeoff, I kind of hold my breath and pray the entire time that I'm not going to have to go jumping off the plane and that it's not going to catch fire. So that is my crazy, interesting fact. So a little bit more, though, about me. I have been the elected prosecutor now. I'm in my 22nd year. I have been working with crime victims and prosecuting and been an attorney now for 37 years. I can't even believe that it's actually been that long. I started my career as an assistant prosecutor. It was a job that I always wanted to have. I wanted to be in a courtroom. I wanted to be helping people. I felt like it was one of the legal jobs that for sure would be a benefit to the community. I would be doing something positive. I would be giving back. What really kind of strengthened my desire to continue to prosecute is early on in my career, I was the 11th of 13 young women who was attacked by a serial rapist. I was more fortunate than most of the other girls, as I had taken a self-defense class and I escaped without a tremendous amount of physical harm. But that really changed my perspective on what victims of crime go through. I was a young prosecutor when this happened, and that experience has always stayed with me. Our office is a very victim-centered office. We do everything we can to try to prevent people from being re-victimized by our justice system. It's really tough to go through the trauma of being a victim, but it's really tough also going through the court system. Very few people are familiar with the terminology and how it works, and it's intimidating, and you have to be in a room with the person who hurt you in some respect. So we have always done a lot for crime victims, and probably my personal experience is at least somewhat related to why I feel so strongly that we do everything we can to help those who are victims of crime. Now, as far as some of the other things I'm going to talk about, I want to start first by giving you an overview of the divisions in our office. You're going to be hearing from individuals a lot more detail about these divisions, but I'm just going to do a little bit of a rough overview. First off, you'll see there is our criminal division. That is the division that people obviously hear the most about, because that's the division where you see all kinds of articles in the paper about the cases we're prosecuting. Just so you know, we prosecute approximately 4,000 cases every year against adults who commit felony crimes in Summit County. So we have a very busy caseload. It's particularly busy now because of all the cases that were delayed during the pandemic. Right now, we have a record high number of homicide cases in the office. I just got my most recent stats report this morning. We currently have 80 homicide cases that we are working on in our office. And I can tell you in the past 20 some years, typically we would have maybe around 35. So that gives you an idea on how much higher our volume is. And the increase in the homicide cases is, in large part the pandemic, but also because of an increase in gun violence in our community. So we've had a lot more homicide cases because of all the gun violence. We also have a civil division. Just so everybody knows, I just got a message that said my computer is going to sign me out and will restart in 5 minutes to complete system maintenance. Warning you, Tanya.
Hey, Sherry, it's James.
Yeah.
Felicia got the same message and her computer did shut down. So I'm not sure exactly why that's happening, but of course it's perfect timing. So
so hers already shut down. All right.
Yes. So just go and we'll see what happens.
I'll keep going, and in the meantime, then I will try to log into my phone to see if I could do it through my phone. Of course, my battery is not the highest right now because I was planning on using this laptop. Okay, I will keep going until I am cut out. So the next division, I had mentioned our civil division. In our civil division, we represent all the different county offices. If they are sued, we represent the judges. If lawsuits are filed against the judges, and a number of other civil related and tax related matters. We also have a juvenile division where we have two sections. We have our delinquency, which is the prosecution of kids who commit various offenses ranging from misdemeanors all the way up to some serious violent felony crimes or felony level crimes. In that division, we also have our child protection unit where we work with the Children's Services Board to protect kids who are abused, kids who are neglected, and we have a high volume of cases involving those kids in both the units in that division. I also oversee our Child Support Enforcement Agency, commonly referred to as CSEA. That division has approximately 45,000 cases, and we collect about $74 million every year. So very, very busy. You'll hear from them at some point as well. Community outreach, Tanya heads that up. I think she's already talked a little bit about that, and I'm going to cover a little bit about our outreach as well towards the end of my presentation. We have our Victim Services Division. We have a whole team of victim advocates, and they work, every single day with all of the victims on our cases. They talk to them at the phone. I talk to them on the phone. Every time there's a court appearance, they meet them in court. So the victims aren't alone sitting in the back of the courtroom, not knowing what's going on. If there's a trial, they sit with the victim throughout the trial, offering whatever support. Oh, it looks like I have 2 minutes now, James, before it's signing me out. The most recent unit that we set up this year in my office is our Elder Protection Unit. We have now assigned a dedicated prosecutor to handle all our cases involving the seniors in our community, both the criminal cases, and there are also cases that are investigated through the Adult Protective Services, where they look into neglect of the elderly, whether it be self-neglect or whether a caretaker or a family member is neglecting somebody. We look into abuse cases and also into financial exploitation cases that involve seniors. So what I was planning to do was to talk a little bit more about elder protection. So I guess, James, if you want to switch to that slide, and perhaps Tanya might want to go through some of the elder protection information if I get logged off while I'm trying to figure out
I
how
could do
to,
that. Yeah.
how to switch to my phone, which I'm hoping will work. If you want to go to the next one, James. For the next slide. Okay, all right. So without reading everything, well, you know what, Tanya, do we do those questions at the end? I see some of the questions.
Yes, we are gonna wait and hold the questions till the end, if that's okay.
Okay, all right, that's fine, because I've seen a couple interesting questions are popping up too. So, you know, our older population is really increasing.
And I think her computer shut off right there.
Okay, I'm just answering actually one of them.
I sent her the link on her phone, so I know Felicia rejoined us pretty quick.
Okay, that's good.
And maybe it takes just a few minutes. Of course, it's perfect timing for our office computers to do that.
I
So,
know, I'm gonna go let Sherry know to at least keep her computer on.
okay, thanks, Felicia. So Tanya, I don't know if you want to continue.
Yes, I will.
Okay, good.
So part of the reason that we started the recent elder protection unit is a lot, you know, remember we talked about stats, right? So we were seeing not only in the calls that we were getting from our senior population and our community outreach, because we do a lot with the senior population, a lot of people talking to us about it. We also then looked at national stats, and so look at our, you know, U.S. population for ages 65 and older. It's been on the rise. You know, 10,000 Americans turn 65 every day. And unfortunately, where we have humans existing, you're going to have crime. And if you have 10,000 Americans turning 65 every day, it's inevitable that crime could occur and they could become victims. And here's the kicker of this all. Elder abuse is often unreported and unrecognized. A lot of times, the individual, the elder person, doesn't really recognize the abuse or denies it because it's a family member. It's someone they love. It's someone they trust. So they're not expecting that. They're not looking for that. And oftentimes, if it's found, if, you know, another person reports and says, you know, we see that this senior is being taken advantage of. Even if you tell the senior, like, is this happening? Okay, well, you know, this is not lawful action. They don't believe it because it's a child of theirs or a caretaker whom they trust and love. And they just don't think that that would happen to them because they have trusted and loved this person for so long. So this makes like our prosecution very hard. And I think that's a lot of why those cases wouldn't come to us, because, you know, people weren't reporting as much as they probably would if they had known. And you're going to see this a lot with the victims. It's kind of a running theme. You know, victims don't always know that they're victims. So this is, you know, two of the reasons why we started the elder protection unit. James, next slide. So the other reason is we've seen our elder population, you know, they decline in health. And a lot of times they're not aware of the abuse that they are receiving because there's competency issues. And there has to be an investigation and a prosecution if somebody is abusing an elder and the elder cannot, you know, describe that or explain that. It makes it a lot harder, you know, when your victims don't know that they're victims, or they don't want to be victims, so they don't want to testify or talk about it. It makes it a lot harder, and it's a challenge for prosecution. And a lot of times you'll see with financial cases, with scams, with things like that, they mainly target, you know, seniors, and they become more complicated because, you know, yeah, you could follow the money, you could follow the trail, but at some point, oftentimes, especially with the scams, you'll see that money gets sent to another country, and at that point, you know, we don't have jurisdiction over that. You know, and it becomes a lot more taxing on law enforcement, and they don't have the resources. and the technology resources to be able to track that after it hits another country. So these all add a layer of complexity to elder protection. In the last 3 years, Adult Protective Service, I saw somebody, it just popped up on my screen, had asked what APS is. Reports across Ohio have increased by 15,831, which is a 50% increase in 3 years of people reporting, elder abuse. And the referrals actually since COVID have increased 67%. So just looking at these numbers, you see there is a high need for prosecution. And we were looking at them and we're like, we have to be able to protect our seniors. So we need to start a unit to do that. And we signed a prosecutor to do that. James, next slide. So here's what we know. We know that 1 to 2 million older Americans suffer from elder abuse annually. That's a high number. The National Center on Elder Abuse reports 1 in 5 cases of elder abuse are reported. So remember, we were talking about the difficulties and like the why behind the reason needing to have a unit to really be specialized on this is because look how low those reports are. And you're going to see that again across the line with victims. Oftentimes people are afraid, like we talked about, their family members, they don't realize, or they don't have the competency to realize that. And the risk, now remember, look at the numbers that we just saw on the previous slide with COVID. The risk of abuse increased when there's social isolation. There's becomes more of a history of physical and mental impairments and abuse that gets hidden in the home that people don't then report because they're isolated in that home. And that was actually something that with victims came to our attention during COVID right away. We wanted to reach out to the victims because we were really worried that victims who are suffering from domestic violence in the home are then now trapped in that home. Where do they go? How do they get help? So we actually launched like a whole, social media campaign to try and reach victims to let them know, okay, here's where you can contact, here's where you can go if something happens. Elder abuse can happen to any older individual. That's really like the qualification. It's more of a senior. That's what makes it elder abuse. Next slide.
Sherry's going to join.
All right.
So I accept her admit her.
Okay, great.
She should be joining momentarily.
And I'm going to go through the questions. I think we answered a couple of them, but I'll go through the questions to see if there's any that we can answer in the chat while Sherry is going over who's at risk. Is she on right now?
She was joining. I'm not sure if she's completely on.
I'm back.
There you are. Yay. Perfect
Hi,
timing
Sherry.
for our computers in our office too.
Thank you for jumping in and having to take over my presentation, Tanya.
No problem. No problem. We're at who's at risk right now. I don't know if you could see that.
We're at
part.
who's at risk, and I'm hoping I don't suddenly get another message that says I have 5 more minutes. I have never seen that happen before, and neither has Felicia, and we're here late. I don't know what that is. Okay, hold on just one moment. Okay. All right, so changing back to me on who is at risk. Frankly, everybody, at some point can be at risk. It affects seniors across all socioeconomic groups, cultures, and races, although women and older women particularly are more likely to be victimized. And dementia, those who have dementia, that also makes for a significant risk factor. James, why don't you skip that slide if you want to move on to the next one. So basically how these cases start is they frequently start with a report or some type of referral that is made to the Adult Protective Services in our county. And you can see here, there's a hotline number. You have to give just some basic information. I've actually made one of these calls myself for a friend of a friend just the adult's name, age, address, a little bit about the alleged abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and, a little bit about the basis for, your belief that this is going on. So once you give some of that basic information, Adult Protective Services will open a case. An investigator will follow up. If they, think that there is, definitely something that is going on that needs to be addressed, they work with my office and again with our senior protection unit prosecutor to go over what all the evidence is, and then some decisions are made as to how to handle the case, whether the case should be prosecuted criminally or whether there's something to be done civilly on the case. Those will be the next steps once a report is made. Now, as far as, if you can go to the next slide, James. As far as the types of cases, and this again is a little bit new as far as our tracking since we just started our specialized unit this year. But we broke it down into the types of cases, that we are working on in 2022. The most common with 57% is the self-neglect. So you have an older person who just is not properly taking care of themselves, and perhaps they don't have family nearby. It may not be known to people initially that there's a problem here, but it comes to the attention of our office and APS that they just are not able to take care of themselves. So that is the majority of cases we see, but second in line would be the exploitation cases. So 19% on the exploitation. That's what we tend to see a lot with respect to our criminal cases. Very sad, in fact, because most of the time, it's a trusted person, it's a family member, or somebody that's maybe a long-time hired caretaker, of an elderly person that is, taking all of their money and really exploiting them. And they're tough cases sometimes because a lot of the victims on these cases may be having competency issues themselves. In some cases, the offender will say, well, she wanted me to have this money and she told me I could withdraw all this money because I needed to buy whatever it might be. So they're hard cases, but unfortunately, in many of them, there are thousands upon thousands of dollars that we see going on in those cases. The third category of our cases is the neglect. So we have a caretaker, or in many cases, a family member that are outright neglecting their family member, and and it is brought to our attention. The fourth category is actual abuse. I mean, physical abuse of a senior. And those are obviously, really sad cases. They are thankfully our lowest percentage. But again, keeping in mind, I think Tanya, I don't know if Tanya covered that slide. Yeah, I think Tanya covered that slide earlier. Many of these cases are not reported. And that is really one of our biggest concerns. When you have only 1 in 5 of these cases being reported, it's concerning. So our work really needs to focus as well on how to get more people to report and what we could do to better protect some of these individuals. I did want to share, it's not on this PowerPoint, but for those who, is it backwards when I hold it this way? I don't know if you could see it right. So we have billboards and we have bus ads everywhere throughout the county that are titled "Report Elder Abuse, Your Reaction Makes a Difference." And it's a joint project that I did with our Sheriff Candy Fothery. We have the Sheriff's 24-hour hotline number on there to make the report. And we have these billboards throughout the county, in addition to outside on buses and inside on buses. We even have a little bit more detail on protecting our seniors. So that's going on through the month of September. in part because every September, oh, very good, James. You have that. I was looking for that. But that's the bus ad that is inside the buses because there's a lot more writing on it. And we figured people will have a little bit more time inside the bus to read this. The big one being the grandparent scam warning. I'm guessing that some of you in our academy here are familiar with this, have heard about it. I was just talking about it earlier today. I did a presentation to a senior group on protecting themselves from scams. And I mentioned that my dad has received that call 2 different times. You know, somebody calls and says, you know, hey, this is your grandchild, and they have some, you know, sad situation and they need you to hurry and get some money to them. So we're trying to warn more people about that because a lot of individuals in our community have fallen victim to that grandparent, grandchild scam. So we're always trying to get the word out on that. So that is our presentation on our senior protection unit. Oh, James, that's a good picture that James just flashed up of the billboard that is up throughout the county. But now I'm going to switch over to a short presentation on what we refer to as our very favorite, most popular employee in the Summit County Prosecutor's Office, and his name is Avery. And I'm guessing most of you have heard about Avery. He has now been with our office for 9 years. He is 11 years old. He had 2 years of training through Canine Companions for Independence. He knows around 40 different commands. He is the best dog ever. I have never heard him bark or growl. He has never done anything that he shouldn't do. He's very calm. He's very loving. He's now 11 years old. So we actually have an application pending right now for a replacement dog. They say that his working life is typically around 10 to 12 years. And he is now, like I said, he's 11 years old, but thankfully he's still very healthy and doing well. But his primary purpose is to help our crime victims, and particularly the children. And unfortunately, we have a lot of cases in this office where children are sexually abused, and those are the cases that he spends the most time on. So when the kids come into our office, Avery is there, provided the kids like dogs. He is there and he sits with them. He rests his head on their lap. He provides comfort. It has made a world of difference in our office to have him. We've had so much, just a much better experience for our child victims when they have a dog to kind of help them through the process. It's particularly heartwarming when he goes to court. If a case goes to trial and a child has to get on the witness stand, Avery walks right into that courtroom with the child. He sits at their feet the entire time they're testifying. He's quiet as can be. The only thing the kids sometimes say is they hear him snoring. He falls asleep and starts snoring during the trial. But it is such a comfort to the kids. So we'll go to the next slide. We have about a 5-minute video that kind of highlights a little bit about Avery.
It's very difficult for a victim to go into a courtroom full of strangers and testify. And it's even more difficult when that victim's a child.
They testify to horrific things, often embarrassing things that none of us would ever want to share. And here they are in this huge room in front of all these strangers, and they're forced to share this. And there they have Avery.
When a child or perhaps teenage victim comes into our office, chances are they're going to have to talk about some pretty terrible things that happened to them. And not only do they have to do that, they have to tell them to a complete stranger, a prosecutor, someone they've never met.
We'll use Avery in meetings with young victims or even adult victims that show a lot of anxiety. Certainly don't want to talk about what had happened to them, but a few meetings with Avery, laying on them and them petting them and having fun with them, just knowing that he'll be there certainly helps them relax and become more comfortable and be more comfortable with us.
He's a dog, but he becomes somebody that they do trust and they rely on. They know he's going to be there, and they know that they're comfortable with him.
Something I've noticed with especially the children is when they come in here, they're very hesitant, they're quiet, they're shy, they hide behind their parents, they hide in the couch or wherever, and Avery comes in and all of a sudden they start to come out of their shell a little bit.
We had one victim in particular who bonded with Avery very quickly, and she would ask, will Avery be there? Can I meet Avery? Can Avery come to court with me? And so we were able to make that happen, and he sits by her feet in the jury box. She was able to just holding the leash. I mean, she doesn't have to pet him, she doesn't have to pay really any attention to him, but just being able to hold that leash gave her a sense of comfort and an ability to tell her story to the jury, and she was able to do that very effectively.
What I have seen with Avery is that these children are more confident and they're more empowered that they have him with them. They don't feel so alone, and it just overall makes them feel more relaxed. And the benefit to having a child more relaxed is it's going to be easier for them to testify, and ultimately it's going to be easier for them to truthfully relay what happened to them.
That was it, Sherry. That was the video.
Yep. Yeah, no, I would just needed to unmute myself.
Sorry.
Just to add a couple more things, Avery also, in addition to working with the kids, we use him in our felony drug court. So we use him to provide support to the individuals who are in our drug court treatment program. And what he does that everybody particularly enjoys is when a drug court participant successfully completes the program and is graduating, there's a ceremony of sorts. And Avery carries a mug up to the front of the courtroom and presents it to the individual who's graduating. And so some of the drug court participants have been known to say, I'm going to get one of those mugs from that dog. It's kind of a motivation to really work hard in their treatment program. And we also use him for our Valor Court program, which is another treatment program for veterans who get in trouble with the law. And Melanie, who is our dog handler for Avery, she brings him to places like the Haven of Rest to play with the kids that are in that facility or living in the homeless center. And she brings him also to places like the Battered Women's Shelter to visit with the kids there. So we bring him to schools, we bring him to presentations. So he does a lot of that type of, a lot of those types of things when he is not working, on an actual case with the victims. Now, as you can see by this slide, he does have his own Facebook page, and we post all kinds of pictures. If you're on Facebook, you should look for it and like his page. It's kind of a fun, uplifting page, as well as he's, on Instagram also. So the last thing that I'm going to go over, and you could see just some little highlights under the title Summit County Prosecutor's Office Innovative Programs. We have a lot of different outreach programs, and one of them, Start by Believing. You'll receive a whole presentation on our Start by Believing program, which is a program to help victims of sexual assault and to try to train individuals on how to best respond if somebody discloses a sexual assault to you. And so you'll hear more about that later on. But we also have some of these other programs that are highlighted here. We have a program called Take Me Home. Tanya, nothing's been discussed about any of these other programs yet?
We've
right?
talked about Take Me Home briefly in the last one and Arrive Alive. I remember one of the individuals had said they they've seen the Arrive Alive flyers. But if you want to just, give a little, it's fine. The big ones I don't think we have talked about are, our bus ads and billboards, which you've kind of covered with the seniors, and then our self-defense classes and why you,
Okay.
why you wanted
Yes.
that.
Okay, I will just to share a little bit more, just to make sure everybody is familiar with Take Me Home. It is a database that contains, I think we have a couple thousand individuals in this database now. There's no charge to enroll somebody in this. We have a picture of the individual and we have contact information. The individuals in here are children who may wander off and have difficulty communicating. My oldest son has autism. He was one of the first people enrolled in this program when we started it. And I keep him in that just because I'm not always confident that he will remember his address or if he gets lost somehow. But it also has a lot of older individuals who have dementia and may wander in the community and may not remember their names or their address. So if one of these individuals who are in the program are found, the police department can much more easily match up the person and get the contact information and reconnect either the child or the adult with their parent or with their caregiver. So this is something that I think is really a great benefit. If you know of anybody that you think should be registered, let us know and we could assist you with making that happen. The billboard We Can Help, that's another campaign we've done before. Just trying to let people know that there are a lot of services when it comes to getting help for those who are victimized. What we really liked about our We Can Help campaign is we also did it in multiple languages, so we could try to get more information to our different communities who probably are not reporting crimes as much as we would like to see because of some of the language barriers that they may have. So we have brochures in other languages. We have an interpreting service if somebody calls the office and needs another language. And so we've been trying to work to make ourselves much more accessible to those who speak a different language. Our self-defense classes, we had one last night. We also had one last month, which was one of our largest classes ever. We had around 150 women at a class in Green. Our group was so big that we had to move the class outside. Thankfully, the weather was nice. The self-defense classes, gosh, we started those at least 15 years ago. So we have trained thousands of women. It's a very practical class. We go through different techniques on how to break a chokehold, a wrist hold, how to kick, where to kick, how to get yourself out of a situation if you are knocked to the ground and are trapped on the ground. If you have not taken that class and you're one of the females in this group, I suggest you, check it out and try to come. Not only is it a really useful class, but it's actually a really fun class, in large part because our instructor is really good. His name is Chad Cunningham, and he's been instructing these classes for a very long time. As I mentioned early on, when I talked about my strong desire to do everything we can for crime victims and what had happened to me in my personal experience, I had taken a self-defense class when I was in college, and it really potentially saved my life. And that is one of the main reasons that we do these classes, and we do them every single month. We took a break from them for a while because of COVID, but we are back doing these classes monthly, and we try to spread them all around the county. So there's a class that's convenient to where everybody is living. So keep an eye out for that. Would love to see you at the class. It's very useful. And with that, I don't think I have anything else, Tanya. I don't know, do you?
No, you covered it all.
Want to do any questions?
Yes, we do have some questions. I will note for self-defense classes, if you want, we have a couple coming up also for seniors next month. So check out our social media, Facebook, Instagram, you'll see that we have the flyers for the dates and locations on those. But Sherry, we have some questions for you. Here's a good one from Valerie. How are you able to work with crime victims every day and keep a positive mental attitude towards society in general?
That is probably, a question that I've been asked many, many, many times over the years. And it's a really good question because we deal with really tragic, awful things, and it can just be depressing and stressful and frustrating to actually see the horrible things that people do to other people. I think the way that, for me, and I think most of the prosecutors in my office and victim advocates would agree, the way that we are able to handle it is we also can see the good that we're doing. We get a lot of positive feedback from crime victims who appreciate everything we're doing to try to make things better for them. And so what we end up doing is we focus on the positives and we think about like the difference we've made in the life of somebody, and we try to focus on that instead of focusing on the horrible pictures we've seen or, just knowing what has happened to some of these victims. But despite having worked with victims and done this for me, over 30 years, it doesn't get easier. I think sometimes, there's this thought that because maybe we have this job and we've been doing it, we get hardened in some way and it doesn't bother us. It bothers me just as much now as it bothered me back when I started in 1985. That's how long I've been at this. It bothers me just as much to hear it. It stays with us. We think about these cases. We think about the victims. But I will tell you also, one of the cases I did personally was just a horrible traumatic case. And I still stay in touch with the victim. And, and we're friends on Facebook, and she'll post something like really positive, about how well she's doing. And that just makes all the difference. I look back and I, met her at the worst time of her life. And now I could see that she has been able to move forward and she's doing really well. And every time I see like a positive post that she makes, it just makes me feel so happy knowing that she was able to overcome the trauma. And it was just a terrible trauma that she had experienced. The other thing I will say that we started doing in the past couple of years is we started doing wellness programs in the office for our prosecutors and for our victim advocates. And more so for the victim advocates, we have actually been paying a professional for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. And our advocates, one Friday every single month, they have a 2-hour wellness session where all the advocates get together with a professional and they talk about their month and what they're experiencing, and they get a lot of support that way. But we also, like I said, have done it for our prosecutors as well. And I think everybody individually tries to practice some of these wellness methods to try to relieve some of the stress that our job causes.
Thank you. So we have another question. This one comes from Missy. And Missy, there's a couple other questions that you have which kind of go more to specific instances, and I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But there was one question that I think, everyone would be curious to. She made a good note. She said, oftentimes, elders get discouraged to notify due to nothing being done by police officers. Do you have any thoughts on that or recommendations?
You said what she said, the elderly?
Yeah, she said people get discouraged to notify due to nothing being done by the police officers.
Okay. Well, and I think that there's, some amount of truth to that, in that these cases are often more difficult than some of the other cases when somebody is elderly, particularly if they're suffering, from, Alzheimer's or an Alzheimer's related disease. It makes for a tougher case. But, I can tell you at our office, we want to do everything that we can do. So I would say to Missy and to everybody, if there are examples where somebody knows that, something is happening to a senior and the police are being contacted and nothing is happening, I would want to know directly. Our office can be called. And particularly now, I have a dedicated full-time prosecutor that could be called that will respond and go over the situation. And also, maybe a call to Adult Protective Services may be a better first step instead of calling a police department directly. The Adult Protective Service has trained investigators who, are more experienced in how to handle the difficult aspects of these cases. And so there may be better results that way.
Okay. And just to make note, Catherine said she was the one who asked that question. So it wasn't.
Oh, sorry, it wasn't Missy. Okay.
And then somebody had asked, and do you ever have or hire citizen support advocates who have been through sexual abuse and are survivors?
Well, I will share because she has shared it publicly, but one of our newer victim advocates was one of the first children who used Avery when she testified at trial about her sexual abuse. And she went on to graduate from high school, and then she went to Akron University and majored in social work. And she ultimately applied for a victim advocate position at our office. She's one of our youngest advocates. And I am particularly proud of her because she's a perfect example of someone who had a really rough life as a child and was strong enough to come to court and testify, and went on to become a victim advocate at our office, and she's doing an excellent job. As far as, I think, did the question include citizen volunteers too, or just hiring?
Are you talking about this question was, do you ever have or hire citizen support advocates who have been through?
We do have, a number of individuals who work as interns in the office. We have an unpaid internship program where people volunteer and come in and get experience working in the office. The majority of our interns are college students and law students who are looking for experience to further their career goals. But we're open to having people who want to come in and volunteer, or maybe even come in and shadow somebody just to see what it's like to work in our office.
We had some nice comments, and I know we're going to have to get started on our next presentation, but just if you have time to read the comments, Sherry, Renee had indicated that Avery sat by my chair. Renee King said, Avery sat by my chair during the victim training last Friday, and I was totally distracted by his cuteness. And he is so soft. Kim had said, as a dispatcher, we often refer people to Adult Protective Services or the elder program through Sherry's office. So there's some nice comments in there, but I think we got all the questions. Are there any other questions that maybe I had missed?
And I'm looking through all the questions and comments now too. So thank you all again for participating in our academy. We're glad you're here.
Thank you, Sherry, for your time. Appreciate it. Okay, so next we're going to have Felicia. I see her, Felicia Easter, who is a supervisor in our office. And she is going to talk to us about domestic violence, and we appreciate your time and you being here, Felicia. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. As Tanya stated, my name is Felicia Easter, and I have been with the office for approximately 22 years as well. I've come in with Sherry, and she cannot get rid of me. I won't. I've been here, and as Tanya stated, I'm a supervisor in the Criminal Division Violent Crimes Unit. However, I also did prosecuted domestic violence cases in our domestic violence unit for over 10 years as well. Domestic violence cases can be some of the most challenging cases that our office handles. Some of those reasons at least one of the main reasons, is the person you are trying to protect and help can be the person who hinders your case, who can and sometimes will hinder your case the most. And we're going to talk about some of those reasons in a moment in this slide. You can go to the next slide, James. To begin, I would like to tell you domestic violence. What is domestic violence? Per the statute section 291925, domestic violence is you knowingly cause or attempt to cause physical harm to a family or household member. A couple things in that statute that jumps out is cause or attempt to cause. The word attempt is built in, so if you don't actually get injured, but the individual attempts to cause you harm, that will qualify as domestic violence as well. Also, domestic violence is one of a few enhanceable crimes, meaning the more you commit, the higher the degree. Your first domestic violence physical harm is a misdemeanor. You commit another domestic violence, it will be enhanced to a felony of the 4th degree. Subsequent domestic violence committed will be enhanced to a felony of the 3rd degree. There's also a felony of the 5th degree for domestic violence if it's committed against an individual woman who is pregnant at the time. Statistics show that when a woman is pregnant, that is often her most vulnerable time. That is some of the reasons the legislature's passed that law for domestic violence F5. If committed against an individual who's pregnant, you will receive mandatory time. That is mandatory prison time. Now, domestic violence does not have to be physical only. It can be mental, it could be threats. And if that happens, it starts off as a misdemeanor of the 4th degree. That too is enhanceable. If you continue to threaten somebody, it goes up. However, it goes up to a misdemeanor of the 2nd degree. That threats only does not increase the felony level. Now, family or household member means individuals living together as family members. You can be intimate partners, living together, a parent-child relationship, living as a spouse, a husband-wife, a child's father, a child's mother, and you have to live together within the past 5 years. So you do not have to currently live together. Say if you and the individual you are living with or you have a relationship or had a relationship with as an intimate partner, you two are no longer together. You broke up and are no longer living together for maybe the last 6 months, but an incident occurs, that still counts as domestic violence because you two have lived together within the past 5 years. Also, those two qualifications in the statute are there for a reason, because you may have a relationship, but you may not live together. If you've never lived together, however, you're intimate partners, that's not domestic violence. And vice versa. It's assault, but it won't be a domestic violence. And vice versa. If you live together, but do not have an intimate partner relationship or living as a spouse, that's not domestic violence. That will be assault. And a good example of that is like college roommates, living in an apartment or things of that nature. So both of those requirements are there, that you have one of those relationships and have lived together within the past 5 years. If you're talking about intimate partner, living as a spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend type relationships. And one thing I want to make very clear is that when individuals come to our office, a lot of cases that I've had, victims will be upset. You're trying to end my relationship. You're trying to end my marriage. You're trying to, end my partnership. That is not the goal of our office. We are not trying to end any marriages. We're not trying to end any relationships. We're not trying to end any intimate partnerships. We are trying to end the violence within those relationships, within that marriage, things of that nature. That is not our goal, to end a relationship, just the violence within those relationships. You can go to the next slide. Now, we prosecute domestic violence cases we call it evidence-based prosecution. We start off with the notion, as I stated before, sometimes these cases can be challenging because the main individual we're trying to help is the main individual who may try intentionally to hinder our case. And we're going to talk about that a little later as to why that may happen. So we proceed as if we do not have a victim. We try to let the evidence speak for the victim, let the evidence speak in the case. Sometimes we need to stand for someone who's being abused who can't stand for themselves. You know, just because they cannot does not mean that the abuser or the defendant should not be held accountable for his actions. The victim may want a certain outcome, but may not be strong enough to stand up to get that certain outcome. And that's when we come in and try to let the evidence speak for the victim. And that's where the evidence-based prosecution comes from. And we may not like when the victim, the person being abused, recant, minimize, or don't come to court, but we understand it, and hopefully you will understand it by the end of this presentation. And we'll talk about that power and control wheel and the cycle of violence. But before we even get to that, a little just right now, what you may or may not know, can anyone think of a reason why someone being abused or a victim of domestic violence may recant their story, or may not want to come to court, or may minimize their story?
They might.
That is great. Fear
of harm.
That is good. Threat of harm, fear of the offender. I see that. And I can't see all the comments. So if you can help a little.
There was just fear in general.
Yeah.
Nowhere to go, loss of children over the incident. Sarah, I
Right.
think Sarah was trying to say something too.
They may need the financial help.
Yes, that's a good one. Embarrassed, backlash from family and friends,
Because
economically dependent on an abuser.
My
No-
currently estranged husband threatens everyone he sees that knows me that that I have a bullet to my head.
Yes, and that statistics have shown that the most lethal or dangerous time for a victim or someone being abused is when they choose to leave their abuser. And one of the things I like to talk about is the victim loves the abuser. One incident does not make the 5 or 10 years that you may have been with somebody just leave out of your body. You know, you still care for that person. Not every day is a bad day. And we understand that as well too. Maybe, like you said, dependent, you know, if the abuser goes to jail, you won't have any insurance for the children. You won't have any health care, things of that nature. Or maybe the person being abused is the sole provider. And if the defendant goes to jail or is not in the household, you won't have childcare. These are real concerns and are justified concerns that we take into consideration and that we acknowledge and that we talk to the victims about. Can you go to the next slide? Now, the power and control wheel. I often ask the question when we're doing jury selection, has anyone had a job that they stay in and they may not like? And I always get hands that go up, oh yeah, me. And I'll say, well, why do you stay in that job? You know, some of the reasons I need the money. Some of the reasons I have bills to pay. Some of the reasons, you know, I'm just not that confident. I've been with this job so long, you know, they don't have the confidence to go out and try to find another job where they have to put children to school. You know, that is the same for if a woman is and I keep saying woman, I apologize, if a victim is abused and they may not leave. These are some of the dynamics that will make an individual stay. I hear individuals say all the time, well, if somebody hits me, I'm out of there. But you just don't know the dynamics that may take place behind closed doors in a relationship. And the power and control wheel helps explain or describe those dynamics. Now, and again, this all doesn't happen at one time. It happens over time. And the victim may not even be aware, you know, this is taking place. So let's talk about the power and control wheel. This wheel was developed by the Domestic Abuse Intervention Project in 1984 to help describe the experience of victims of violence and the tactics that abusers used. These are the tactics that an abusive partner uses to keep their victim in a relationship. Now, I just want to touch on some of them. I won't read it, it's up there, but using intimidation, making her afraid by using looks, actions, gestures. You all know, if, like a parent, if you're out in a store and your child is acting up and you give that look, that child knows, don't make mommy or daddy mad because you may get a whooping later. That is the same type of look an abuser can give to a victim. Give that look, and a victim will know, when I get back home, the abuse may come, the physical violence may come. So just by giving a look, using emotional abuse, putting her down, making her feel bad about herself, calling her names. This is the defendant saying stuff like, I'm the only one who will ever love you. You can't live without me. You will fail without me. This is some types of emotional abuse. And a victim will start to internalize these things and believe this. Using isolation, controlling what she does, who she sees and talks to, what she reads. This helps an abuser, so when a victim gets out in public, there's no need for the physical violence. This isolation with all the other dynamics and tactics helps, because the victim doesn't get out of line. So if he does go to jail, maybe when she comes down to the prosecutor's office, he knows and is confident she will not say anything. He doesn't have to be around all the time for his emotional abuse or intimidation to carry over. Minimizing, denying, and blaming, making light of the abuse and not taking her concerns about it seriously. Saying the abuse didn't happen. This is when a victim will say things like, if I had just not done that, I know he's cranky in the mornings, or when he gets off work, I know he likes his coffee here, or his food there, and I didn't do that. That's where you start self-blaming and minimizing what what the abuser does, or the abuser will help do that and say stuff like, well, if you just did what I said, I like this when I come home, why didn't you do that? One of the big things is using children as well. Making her feel guilty about the children, using the children to relay messages. If mommy, just stops acting like this, or if mommy keeps acting like this, then we may not be together. Daddy may not be here when you get out of school. I may not be able to help you do your homework anymore, and it'll be all mommy's fault. Things of that nature. Using male privilege, treating her like a servant, making all the big decisions, acting like the master of the castle. This can go to paralyze the victim, making her feel like she cannot make any decisions for herself. And if she does make decisions for herself, that's when the emotional abuse may come in. You did this, why did you do that? That is so stupid. So that kind of paralyzes someone when the victim, when she does go to make a decision, she doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know what to do. If it's the wrong decision, she may get beat, and it's never the right decision, according to the abuser. Using economic abuse, which some of you all talked about, preventing her from getting or keeping a job, making her ask for money, giving allowance. And this starts off where the victim may say, oh, my man is great. He takes care of me. I don't have to work. He pays all my bills. He gives me this amount of money, but that's going to come at a cost. And once you stop working and become totally dependent on someone, that may stop if you don't do what he says. And if it stops, what do you have to fall back on? And that's a good way for an abuser to control his victim, because you don't have anything to fall back on and you're dependent economically on that individual now. And finally, using coercion and threats, making and or carrying out threats to do something to hurt her, such as, I will take the children, you have no job, you have no career, you have no stability, no court will ever award you the children, making the victim feel like she is unsuitable, or putting her down for everything that she does. And again, this happens all over time. And sometimes, or a lot of times, the victim doesn't even realize it's happening. Because like I said, for every one bad day, there's maybe 100 good days, or for every, 10 bad days, but it's those bad days or the little stuff that gets ingrained. As the saying goes, it's the little things. And those little things will add up. And before you know it, a victim will be in the power and control the dynamics will have went through and enveloped the whole relationship. You can go to the next slide. And this is a pattern. This is a cycle. It doesn't happen every day. Like I said, it may be 2 bad days every 100 days. It's a cycle, the cycle of abuse. First, there's the tension building. This is when the victim is walking on eggshells. It's when you have to watch what you say, you have to watch what you do. Tension increases, breakdown of communication. Victim becomes fearful and feels the need to placate the abuser because of the power and control will, and she knows what may or may not happen. The next phase is the incident. That's the abuse. That's the verbal, emotional, and physical abuse. That is when 911 gets called. And that's because it's autonomic. It's self-preservation. When you're getting beat, you're going to want to call 911, even with the dynamics of the power and control will in the relationship. It's just self-preservation. You want help at that time. Phase 3, reconciliation. That's normally right after the abuser gets arrested. He's in the Summit County Jail. He'll make those jail phone calls. And that's when, I'll never do it again. The apologies come. He's crying. That's when the abuser professes his love. He'll get help. He'll go to counseling. He'll go to therapy. And sometimes it just depends. That blame the victim still goes on to a lower certain extent. Honey, if you just wouldn't have done this, I won't do that again. And then comes the calm. That's like the beginning of the relationship all over again. The incident is forgotten. No abuse is taking place. It's like the honeymoon phase. This phase lasts a while until it doesn't. That's when you're all lovey-dovey again. And like I said, it lasts until it doesn't, until she's walking on eggshells again. And that's why it's called the cycle. It goes on, and it just keeps cycling itself over and over. You can go on to the next page. The lethality assessment helps with the prosecution of domestic violence cases as well. And what is the lethality assessment? That is an evaluation that predicts the likelihood of serious injury or death. The assessment provides an effective method to identify victims of domestic violence who are at the highest risk of being seriously injured or killed by their intimate partners. And we use this assessment for many things when we are evaluating and deciding what to do and how to handle and how to proceed with the case in court. Prosecutors use the lethality assessment in assessing bond, arguing bond with the court, sentencing, even on how to plea and what to plead a defendant to. Do we want to make sure the charge stays the same. So we make sure we get prison. Is this a case where, based on, what the victim has come in and said, do we want to lower the charge, or do we want to make a certain recommendation at sentencing or treatment? Do we want, like I said, prison or a program if an abuser is amenable to it? It helps guide our decisions and our recommendations. Go on to the next slide. This is an example of the questions on the lethality assessment. And these questions were just not randomly put here. They were developed and put on this assessment because of the answers and how they predict and help us understand what cycle or what phase or how the power and control dynamics are enveloped into a relationship. For instance, does he own a gun? That lets us know that the abuser has access to a deadly weapon. Has he ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a lethal weapon? That demonstrates to us that an abuser not only owns a deadly weapon, but will get the deadly weapon and have it in a time of an argument, a heated passion, and may in fact use it. Does he use illegal drugs? That lets us know that his inhibitions may be lowered with these other factors of, does he own a gun and has he ever gotten it? Individuals sometimes are more willing to do things when their inhibitions are lowered. But I say that with a caveat. I've had individuals come in and say, oh, he only is violent. He's only violent because he drinks. Drinking does not cause violence. You can drink and not be violent. Violence is your character. Drinking lowers your inhibitions. So you do what your character is. You're more likely to do what your character is. But drinking does not produce violence. If you're violent, that's because that's your character. Another one is, have you ever been beaten by him while you were pregnant? Again, as I stated, women are most vulnerable when they are pregnant and in a more vulnerable state. That's why the laws protect, the domestic violence laws are more rigorous and protect the pregnant. And then, do you believe he is capable of killing you? That question goes a long way as well, because it shows how the power and control will, those dynamics are affecting the victim in that relationship, because she stays with an individual who she believes may be capable of killing her. And again, we may not like this, but I hope after you've seen and even some of the answers you've given in that power and control will understand why. And in our cases that go to trial, we have an expert, Terry Heckman from the Battered Women's Shelter. We used to get all the time, we would file a motion for an expert, and our motion would be titled, we would need an expert to explain to the jury the counterintuitive behaviors of our victims. And we say that because most individuals who do not understand the dynamics of the power and control wheel and the cycle of violence will sit back. Jurors will judge like, wow, why is she staying? She must like this or she must not. That's why we would have to get an expert to explain, no, here is the power and control wheel. Here is the cycle of violence. And this goes into the dynamics of the relationship that may make it very hard for a victim to leave their abuser. It's not that they like it, not that they want to stay, but there are reasons. Can you go to the next slide?
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Can he go back now 2 slides for 1 second?
You say, can we go back 2 slides?
The cycle?
Yes.
Yeah, for just one, it was that one.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to look at it again. I appreciate it. I'm sorry.
And if there's any information such as the cycle of abuse or the power and control wheel, if you would like a copy of that, our office will be more than happy to provide that information to you as well.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Are you, is that okay?
Yes, I'm all good. Thank you. I'm sorry.
You're welcome. Now, some of the ways that we prosecute domestic violence without a victim, as I said, maybe try to let the evidence speak for the victim are enumerated on this slide. 911 calls are very good. I love 911 calls because they are happening at the time. As I stated, it is self-preservation, it's autonomic. You touch something hot, you take your hand back. Someone is harming you, you want help. You want that harm, that pain, that injury to stop right then, so you call 911. We listen to a victim's voice. We listen to their cadence, their word usage on a 911. Are they crying? Are they breathing heavy? Are they screaming on the phone? There's a lot a 911 call can let us know when we're prosecuting a case. What do we hear in the background? Do we hear the abuser? Is there yelling in the background? Is there stuff clanging and banging in the background and stuff being thrown? Things of that nature. We use photos as well. It shows injuries. If there are holes in the wall, he punched a hole in the wall, you know, we can take a picture of that hole in the wall. He used a knife, we can take a picture of that knife. And that gets us into, it's not there, but the physical evidence as well. And we go out and we have trained officers in different jurisdictions on how to investigate a domestic violence case, because that's important. How can we let the evidence speak for the victim if we don't have any? So it actually starts with the first responders, the officers who our office have went out and done trainings for the officers. Physical evidence, we've trained them. If there's physical evidence, please try to get it. If he used a knife, take the knife. If you can't get a picture of it, take the physical knife. You know, if she says he grabbed me by the collar, my nightgown, and swung me around, you know, the nightgown, the collar may be all crumpled or maybe stretched out. Take the nightgown if you can. Or he yanked the phone cord out the wall. If you can't get a picture, of course, take a picture, but get that phone cord. That phone cord may be very damaged, or he pushed the door in, you know, so hard, it may have split the frame. Get the picture. Picture and physical evidence go hand in hand. Or he pulled my hair. He pulled my hair. You can't really see an injury in your head or hair being pulled out, but if there is a handful of hair on the floor, take a picture. Put the hair in a bag. You know, so we've trained officers on stuff like that. EMS reports, which are when the EMS is called out, and medical records, we use those a lot as well. Again, same concept as when you call 911, you want help. When you go to the hospital, I found that victims are more apt to tell what happened, because you're not thinking about prosecuting at that moment. You're thinking about, I need help, I'm injured, and I want to tell this medical professional what's the matter with, I want to tell the truth, you know, what's the matter with me, so they can properly diagnose and treat me, like what's hurting me right now. So those records are good as well. Also, what the hospital write up regarding their injury, what the hospital notes what their injuries are. You know, once they get undressed, officers may not be able to see that, you know, they had a lump, or, you know, officers may not feel in the head, you know, they had lumps in their head. So what the hospital writes the injuries are, what EMS reports the injuries are, those are good as well. Jail calls, I talked a little bit about that with the cycle of violence. You know, after the incident, it is when they go to jail, it's the I'm sorry's and I won't do it again. I'll go to counseling, or don't come to court, or this is what I want you to say. This is what I want you to do. That is great. The first 3 days, you know, after the incident, when the abuser is in jail, Those are great. I absolutely love those calls. Or right around when they go to court, right before or right after, because if the abuser is still dominant, you know, and have that control over the victim, they'll say, don't go to this meeting, don't come to court, and we can get all of that. So jail calls are great. Even though they say right on there, this is being recorded, you know, that kind of goes out the window, and you'll be surprised what is said on a jail call. So that is great too. Body worn cameras. I like body worn cameras because it's the 911 call is good. As they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, just imagine a video, you know, her cadence. You can hear that in a 911 call, but you can actually see it on the body worn camera. You know, she may be talking fast, she may be crying, but what is a victim's hands doing? Is it covering her face when she's talking? Are there children there? Is the children cowering in the corner? Look at the appearance of the house. And that's that night. You know, it's one thing to have something described to you. It's another thing to see it. You know, it was pulled out the wall. You know, it's one thing to see it in a photo, but to see the victim as she goes around and points out these things, and to see her mannerisms as she does, and to see how scared or how she's shaking at the time when she points out some of the things he did and how he did it. Also, the fact that she's still excited about what had just happened. She's still under the excitement about the incident, which means her statements will be more genuine. She doesn't have time to form reflective thoughts, so to speak. She's telling you exactly what happened right after it happened. What's not up there is one thing we have to prove is family or household member, and that's one of the areas that can be negated by a victim if they recant or minimize. And that's a big one because it takes it out of the felony range to a misdemeanor range. If you're not a family or household member and it's here with us, it's a felony. But if you take that element out, it falls to a misdemeanor. So how can we try to prove that based on evidence? Well, we train our officers. When you go out to the house, do you see, you know, men's shoes there? Do you see men's clothing there? Do you see any mail with a man's name on it there? Especially in AMHA housing, where some women cannot have someone living with them based on the AMHA contract they may, you know, sign. And they may be cooperative, you know, they may want the individual prosecuted. However, again, self-preservation. They may not tell the truth about that one fact because it could affect their family, you know, and their children. And that's something they do not want to see happen. So we have to train our officers to try to get as much evidence they can and see, don't take anything for granted when they're at the scene. You know, if there's mail, if you can't take it, take a picture of that mail. You know, we can use that later, and we often do, to try to prove that element, family or household member, that those two live together. Talk to neighbors, you know, and a lot of crimes you don't have to do that, but talk to neighbors. Do you see this person coming in and out the house often? How often? How long? You know, when you see them, you know, come in and out, is it a relatively quick thing? Do they stay over there? What kind of car do they drive? How often is that car there? Things of that nature. And also in jury selection, we often have to, again, like I said, when we get the expert to come in and talk about the counterintuitive measures or things that victims do, in jury selection, we talk to the jurors. You know, some of the questions I asked you, why would a victim not want to come in? Does anyone know? We have to get the jurors to care. You know, if we have a trial and jurors see the victim isn't there. I've had jurors say, well, if she doesn't care, why should I care? And that's what we have to try to make the jury understand in a short amount of time, the dynamics of the cycle of violence and the power and control will. I've also had victims after after the trial, after I have fought with them tooth and nail to get them in court, nasty phone calls, you're not doing what I want. I've had victims come up to me after trial, after a guilty verdict, and say, thank you. I would have not been able to do that if it wasn't for you. You know, this gives me time to get myself together so when he get out, I can be more stable. So I've had individuals fight me tooth and nail ahead of time, but then thank me afterwards because they knew that result was the best result for them, their child, and their family. Here we have a court headed by Judge Catherine Michael, and it's the Summit County Domestic Violence Intervention Court. And at one point in time, the Summit County Prosecutor's Office had the only felony domestic violence court in the state of Ohio. This court is comparable. However, you get in this court after you have pled and you've been placed on probation. And this court try to combat some of the dynamics of the power and control wheel, from their stabilization targets to their criminogenic targets. They will try to treat and get counseling. There is something called the 52-week batterers intervention program, counseling for the individuals. So it won't be such a cycle. Sometimes individuals will go to prison, get back out with the same mindset, go to the same person. You know, we try to stop that cycle and try to educate the abuser so they can try to see what's going on, what they're doing, and also the victim. I know when I did the court, victims would want the protection order lifted. Before they could do that, we would ask that they go to a program, actually require, because the judge at the time would not do it unless they went to a program. I cannot remember the name of it, but a program to try to go over some of the elements or the dynamics of the power and control wheel to make sure they were aware and how to get themselves out of those type of relationships, and even to be just literally aware of what's going on. Because again, like I said, 9 times out of 10, a victim isn't even aware of what's going on. Next slide. And this slide basically is the program overview. And it talks about the screening and assessment of how you get in the program. And it's 2 steps. There's a pre-screen and a full screen to get in. And then it talks about the overview. This program provides a comprehensive supervision and effective programming. The court ensures victims and the public's safety while providing opportunities for participants to succeed. And that diagram shows the dynamics of the court. Phase 1 is compliance. Phase 2 is programming. And phase 3 is maintaining what you have learned from the programming. A lot of people will get stuck, so to speak, in phase 2, which is one of the most important phases, is the programming. And once they get through the programming, it's the maintenance is the next. I guess all 3 phases are tough, but it's the maintenance phase, because sometimes, you know, people backslide or want to hurry up and get off probation. Some people go through it just to do it, to get from under the court's control. But that's one of the things that the court makes sure is the maintenance, that they are able to apply the skills and what they have learned during the programming. You can go to the next slide. I talked about our unit. I'm running out of time. You can go to the next slide. And training law enforcement. I'm going to touch on this briefly. Protection orders. These are orders granted by the judge ordering a defendant to stay away from you. And with a protection order, If it's violated, charges can be filed and a person can be arrested versus a no contact order. And that's a big thing. Sometimes individuals will only have a no contact order and think it's a protection order. With no contact orders, you should call their, you should call their probation officer because they're violating the terms and conditions of their probation. And their probation officer can let the court know, and theory can go back to court and the court can violate their probation, but it's still not a new charge. Protection orders, if those are violated, are new charges. Some of the things protection orders may include are, like I said, stay away. They can't get within so many feet. Protection orders can award temporary custody. One of the main things is require the abuser to maintain, I call it the status quo. It can require the abuser to maintain support if the abuser customarily provides support for the family or household. They can't do stuff out of revenge. You sent me to jail, so I'm not gonna pay the light bills. You're gonna, be in the dark. No, if they normally pay the mortgage, they normally pay the light bills, a protection order can say, nope, you're going to continue doing this. You're not going to retaliate by not paying the bills if this person stands up for their rights. There's different kinds of protection orders. Anti-stalking, that's issued by our felony criminal court, protects victims of stalking. A civil protection order, sorry if I'm going a little quick, I know the time is running out, is issued by domestic relations court. It protects victims of domestic violence. And one of the main things is not the same as a restraining order. A restraining order, I don't want to say protects property, but deals with property. It stops the sale of property or transfer of money. It's different. It's just terminology. A protection order can be up to 5 years when you go. And there's more to it, but just know the difference. It's given in domestic court, and an anti-stalking order is here in felony criminal court. And you can go to the next page. Hope I didn't go too fast at the end. Does anyone have any questions? I appreciate your time.
There are a lot of questions. Thank you for being on time. I appreciate it. So we'll start with Missy asked a question: to what extent do you, meaning the office, search for a suspect?
When you say search, if someone is out and have a CAPIAS, we can get the Ohio Violent Fugitive Task Force to search for them. I've done that on multiple occasions, but our office does not search. We are reactive. Once somebody gets charges and comes to our office, that's when we get involved. However, if someone is out, oh yeah, we always reach out to the task force, especially if we have information and we have investigators here where we can try to find out information on a suspect, and we'll be more than happy to pass that along to the task force and say, oh, look, we got a new address. I think this may be where he is. Can you check this address? And so we'll reach out and they'll try to find the suspect as well.
Okay, we had a lot of great conversation between all of the members of the Citizens Academy, which has been really great. I know it's past 7:30. If anybody wants to leave, we're going to continue with the questions, but I do want to thank you all for, offering in the chat questions and answers and the conversation. It's been really great. Kim had asked, and she works for dispatch. She's like, are there certain questions you want us to ask if possible, or anything else that will help with the prosecution?
You know what, that is a great question. Because two things. One, I know you all have to do your job and the way you have to do it. One thing I've noticed is that helps us is let a victim talk. And I know you have to get out. Is the person still there? A man or female, what is the description, and things of that nature. But I've had some where, okay, and the police will be there shortly, just calm down and just be quiet. If she talks, that is great for us because she'll talk about what happened. And so if she does not cooperate later, we'll have that 911 call. The more she talks, the better in some cases.
Okay. And then there was a question about us doing trainings with dispatch, which I think is a great idea and we can work on. So I just wanted to address that. Another question from Joyce. Is it true that sports events like the Super Bowl, playoff, or various sports are times when women are more likely to be abused?
One, I can't say, I have read articles. I do not know the research, but I have read articles. Yes. I don't know if there's a correlation. I know it's because men are together, and then there's the drinking, and then there's the, how do I say it, the testosterone level of the sporting event, which I'm probably saying it incorrectly, but the articles I've read, yes. I don't know if there's a connection because it's a sporting event and domestic violence, but yes.
I can answer that as a dispatcher for Akron. Our call volume goes up
Yes.
after a game, and usually during football season and basketball season, like when playoffs start happening, we get busier during the games and after them.
And some of that may be because of the power and control wheel too. You know, if their team doesn't win, they're upset, you know, they're mad, they've been drinking at the game, and then you do one little thing and it's the blaming. That's one big thing with domestic violence. No matter what happens to the abuser, it is always the victim's fault. He stubbed his toe, it's because you didn't have the chair moved over close enough to the table like it should be. You know, he's late for work. It's because the way you were snoring at night kept him up. He will always find a way to put whatever he does wrong on the victim.
Sorry, I was having problems unmuting. There's a question here that says, is domestic violence an issue when courts award child custody to a man? Is it hard for a man to get people to believe and help him, such as a grand jury? And that's from Joyce. I don't know if I understand the question, Felicia, if you do, or if Joyce, if you want to explain it a little more.
Yeah, sorry, because I couldn't hear you at the beginning, and it seems like a compound.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, you know, when we think of domestic violence, of course, we always think of the man being the abuser and the woman being the victim. So I'm asking, are men coming forward more, if you will? Because it seems to be there's more cases of fathers getting custody of their children. So then does the woman, are there cases where maybe that woman is angry and she becomes abusive or does violence against that man because she lost custody of her children? And then does the grand jury believe the man?
Some of that question I can answer. Women, and there's been seminars on this, and you know what movie that I've been to 2 different seminars that they'll use? It's, I don't know if anyone's ever seen What's Love Got to Do with It, with Angela Bassett. And she finally gets fed up with what Ike did. And in the back of the car, when she had that white suit on, she finally fights back. I just looked at that movie at first as a movie, but then the seminar that I went to on domestic violence made me look at it in a whole new light. And one thing that you said about the woman fighting back and getting custody, that I'm not for sure because I'm not in domestic relations, but I do know that when a woman decides to leave or fight back, sometimes they are economically at a disadvantage. So, and I use that movie, like that movie, she did not have much when she left. So the man will have more stability and things of that nature. So sometimes the man may get custody in the short run. And as far as men coming forward, I've had domestic violence cases that involve men, and studies show and research shows that unfortunately when a man, a woman commits domestic violence on a man, she uses a knife. There's a lot of times where there's knives used. And I just remember one case I had where the woman used a knife and cut cut the man, and you could tell in court she was just cowering, and I got the background, and there were 3 other domestic violences where she was the victim. Now, I don't know, maybe it was just me, but she pled to that felonious assault, but I gave her probation. I offered probation, and that was because it was clear that she was abused. She did something wrong at that point in time, but it was clear that she had been abused, but she just fit the stereotype perfectly, because normally when women fight back, they will use a weapon, a knife.
So there's a bunch of questions here relating to protection orders. And I'm trying to get through all of these questions. You know, how do you keep, I'm kind of going to go through them because I think that you can answer them all together. How do you keep victims safe? What if the person with the protection order contacts the person they got a protection order against? I'm going to keep going here because they're all kind of, how does domestic violence court work with the juvenile court and cases when they're shared together? So we're kind of getting into a conversation about protection orders, juvenile court, domestic violence court.
Along with that, can I ask a question, Tanya?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it true that if, say I have a protection order, I'm just going to use you, Tanya. If I have a protection order against you and I had it issued, is it true, Felicia, that I technically can break my own restraining order, but that if the other party responds, it can be a violation?
Correct. When you say break it, you cannot, the person who is the protected party can never
technically violate it.
Correct. Violate your own protection order. And that, and I've had cases where unfortunately,
no offense, I think that's kind of messed up.
And I was going to say, I've had cases where the protected party has used that as a tool. You know, they'll call the guy and say, you know, come over, everything is hunky-dory for a while. But as soon as things get bad, they'll call the police and say he's over here and he'll get arrested. Now, in bold, if you look at those protection orders in bold, it says right at the bottom, I don't have one, but the protected party, something that can't violate it, and they cannot permit you to violate it. I mean, it's in bold and in caps at the bottom.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't make somebody do something they don't want to do. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it. Is that what you're meaning? Like, we
correct. So you have to be careful, and the courts now tell people be careful, because the protected party cannot lift the protection order. You have to go back to court to have it lifted, even if they say come over, I don't want it anymore, or you know, you do it at your own risk. Until you get those papers, it's still a legal document. Correct. That is correct. And also, when people come in and say, "Well, I have a protection order," that is true. You do. Always call. I used to tell a piece of paper. Correct. Always call the police. Always keep
Tanya, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, Missy, don't worry. You know, we're kind of gonna flow right into. We have a couple more questions. You know, one of them. I did want to say
that I myself, I was a victim of domestic violence. It's a 6'1", and I was on a walker. I couldn't walk, and when I went to grab myself and pull myself up off the floor, after going through 2 walls and a cupboard, there was a pair of scissors, and I stabbed him in the back. When she brought up the knife issue, that's what made me think of it. But the cops were here. They saw the destruction that he had done, and I was grateful because he tried to have me charged with felonious assault, but they wouldn't charge me because they had seen the destruction that he had done, knowing that I couldn't walk. You know what I mean? So, I mean, they thankfully look at all the evidence. They don't just look at if someone pulls a knife, you know, technically it is felonious assault, but at the same time, looking at all the aspects of it, you know what I mean?
Well, and then there's another question kind of along these lines where they had said, what are the barriers for victims in getting these protection orders? And Missy, you know, kind of talked about, you know, if they're, you know, she could be charged or whatever, but what do you think that some of the barriers and victims face when they want to get a civil protection order, period?
Well,
Marriage.
you have to go to a domestic relations court, and the law changed about, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, where the abuser has to be personally served. That was a big one, that they have to actually be, well, maybe not personally, they have to actually get service. That was a big one because they may have knowledge of the protection order. They may absolutely know about it.
So
But
you
now
can't
they have to be
publicly announce- You
served.
can't publicly post it?
No, so they have to be served.
Oh, wow.
So even if they have actual knowledge of it, it does not matter. They have to be served for the terms and conditions of it to take effect. For them to be held to that protection order, they have to be served.
Interesting.
So there is a little bit of discussion in the chat, and I'm going to read Mr. Ali's question, which kind of goes back to Joyce's question a little bit. I understand the needs for prosecution and the courts to be effective in protecting real victims. What protections are there against people using the system to their advantage to gain financials, custody, or property? We have seen quote unquote victims make false claims and innocent people lose their freedom and economic mobility to prison and criminal records. The criminal justice system can be heavy-handed and not commensurate to the real actions that may or may not have taken place. What protections do falsely accused defendants have? And I think that's the bottom line. What protections do falsely accused defendants have? Does prosecution truly seek the truth as ethics dictates, or is convict at all costs?
No, I think that's the great part about working for this office and under Sherry. We actually, yes, that is one of the things. We are fair. We try to get justice here. And when I was in the domestic violence unit, we dismissed cases after we thoroughly went over the evidence, went over what was said. We'll have witnesses in, we'll have victims in before trial. It's one of the things that we were all taught here, or one of the things that Sherry would like us to do is meet with everyone prior to trial. Some of the other big counties may not be able to do that, but we do. And if the testimony and or evidence does not coincide, we look at that. We look at that and we try to uncover everything before going to trial. That is, prosecutors are held to a higher standard. It's not just about a conviction rate. At least not in this administration, it's just not about a conviction rate. We are held to a higher standard. We try to do justice, and that's not just for the victim, for every party involved.
Like, I can honestly say I know we're after time and everything, but I can say, like, for my estranged husband, his baby mom said that he threw his 3-week-old, this is one of his 6 domestic violence, said that he threw his 3-week-old baby off a third-story balcony. But the baby had no bruises, nothing wrong with the baby. Now, you know that that's a bogus allegation. There is no way that a 3-week-old baby could be thrown from a third-story balcony and not have any charge. You know what I mean? So, like, that's part of where I'm at. Like, I'm stuck because I know that there have been false allegations, but at the same time, I also know what I have dealt with, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And I've watched the abuse that his stepson, who was in our custody, endured. So, I mean, it's a struggle for me because I see both sides of it. It's kind of like looking at the psychological, the wine glass and the faces, and I can see both sides of it, and it's a struggle for me.
Yep. There's no rush. Yeah, there's no rush to prosecution. We make sure the police do their investigation, and we try to talk to everyone and uncover every stone that we can as well.
It's kind of, Missy, like we talked about in the last session, you know, the justice system is created by humans. Humans are not perfect, and our justice system is not perfect. But
We are infallible.
yeah, that being said, you know, when you guys had asked me, how do you switch from defense to prosecution? You could say, I said it's coming to this office because Sherry Bevan Walsh really does not, I'm not just saying it 'cause she's on this, you know, I echo Felicia's sentiments, and she's not out for the conviction
Right.
route, for the truth. And you're not really changing sides because, you know, what matters is that the law is being followed, the truth is being uncovered, and that our community is safe. And so, you know, as a defense attorney, it was kind of the same thing.
It
So
is, at the same time, Tanya, like I said to you, I sent you personally, I will definitely be in contact with you because there are things that just don't add up for me. You know what I mean?
Yep, and
And that's
we'll
just
keep going
between
back
you,
to that
yeah, I mean,
quote.
that's just me.
We'll could just
And
keep
we'll
going
discuss
back to
it
that
and we'll
quote.
talk about it off topic.
Yep, we will. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I definitely will.
And
And
I
I appreciate everyone.
everything, Felicia and Sherry Bevan Walsh. I know she'll rewatch this, but I appreciate all the information you guys have given, because someone who wants to start their own nonprofit, this information is very, very, very crucial and helpful to me. And that's why I tried to, you know, and wanted to join this group, because it's very important to me to know the ins and the outs of all of this. But I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you off record. You know what I mean? Like off the chat.
Thank you, Missy, and thank you everyone for staying late. It doesn't look like we have any more questions unless I missed something in the chat. We had a lot of thank yous, Felicia. You know, before we close, make sure you take a look. There was a lot of thank yous to you.
So
and
many thank yous.
Sherry is still on here. So we appreciate everyone's time and those of you who stayed after for the questions.
Felicia, I appreciate all of your information very much so. And again, Sherry Bevan Walsh, I don't agree with everything, but I do appreciate it. I really do. Because I know at the end of the day, the end result. You know what I mean?
Prosecutor Walsh, did you see my message to you?
I was just, is this Joyce?
Yes.
Thank you, Joyce. Wait, who is your bishop?
The House of the Lord.
Oh, all right. Love all of them, you know?
Hi, Sherry.
I've met you there personally and talked with you a few times. So.
Yes. Yep. Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you all. I appreciate everybody being here. And I think there were a lot of really good questions. We'll go back through the questions some more. And if it looks like somebody didn't get answered, you know, Tanya will follow up on that.
Thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. James, if you can keep it on just for 1 minute while I cut and paste, just to make sure. Okay, I think I got all the questions. All right, great. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a good evening.